Hi, everyone. This is the next video in our identity governance sort of end-to-end demo that our good pal Dan came up with. Hi,
Good
Dan.
morning,
How's it
team.
going?
Hey,
Good
Dan.
morning. Nice to see everyone again.
So, Dan, I think to start, what would make the most sense, and especially if somebody skipped around in the videos, let's do an overview or kind of a recap of the architecture. I think that would be a good starting point.
Sure, yeah. So again, real quickly, team, this was an evolutionary process, if you will, to allow a customer to get a handle on external sharing. And there are a couple of components in it. Our first component is SharePoint, and then we leveraged Azure Identity Access Packages, and then finally some automation with PowerShell. And so just as a reminder, we had the architecture of a SharePoint site. Within the SharePoint site, we had different departments. Each department here is secured with an Azure AD security group.
Okay.
So if a department wanted to share a document, again, this was a state Medicaid agency, and they wanted to share documents with Hospital One, they would create Hospital One here in the folder. They would then secure Hospital One with an Azure AD security group. And then to ensure that we have proper access and removal of access, we leveraged Azure Identity Access Packages here. So if we come down to identity governance, we can see that we have access packages for each share out here. So we take a look at the access packages. The access packages puts the user that's assigned to the access package into the AAD security group,
Okay.
and then grants that same user visitor access to the actual SharePoint site here. Okay. Now, as this solution evolved, the customer thought this might be a very good way to incorporate into their user deprovisioning process as well. So in this case, the deprovisioning of a user involved renaming the user account and then creating a folder in a SharePoint site and then copying the content of the user's OneDrive into that particular SharePoint site.
Okay.
The reason for this is they needed to maintain the user's OneDrive data. They needed the OneDrive data assigned to the manager, and then they wanted to release the license for the user because the user had left the department.
Sure.
And so to achieve this, we came up with a number of different solutions here, leveraging Azure automation accounts with runbooks in a hybrid mode. So if you're not familiar with a hybrid mode, it's the idea that the actual PowerShell script that's in the automation account is executing here on premise.
Right.
Right. So then we would do things like renaming the account. We run commands like set-remote mailbox. And then additionally, we also did the work to create the appropriate access package structure, as you can see here, create the site, and then ultimately go ahead and send a command or over to a logic app to copy the content of the user's OneDrive into a particular SharePoint folder.
Okay.
So if we think back yesterday to the PowerShell script we ran, this is an automated way with a few more steps, in all fairness, to achieve almost the same result. The result being a SharePoint folder that's secured with an access package, of which we can then leverage policy for allowing a user to access it and then removing access when deemed appropriate. So what we're going to demo today is the user deprovisioning process and in an end-to-end walkthrough. So when we deprovision a user, we run a PowerShell script because we've got a lot of work to do in the deprovisioning process. Again, such as renaming, setting attributes in Azure, creating access packages, and that's what this script will do here. And then we'll work our way through the automation in the runbook, and then ultimately to the logic app.
Okay.
So we have our on-premise Active Directory. My on-premise Active Directory is named Yellow. Okay.
I like it.
And you can see that this is a very prompted process here to make this as easy as possible for the end users.
And I like that. We talked about that when we recorded the first set of videos. I think it always is helpful if folks understand the flow. If they don't understand PowerShell, I think seeing some of this in action helps them understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So I've logged into the on-premise Active Directory, and I've also logged into Azure AD O365 with the same. Now, because we wanted the deprovisioning process to be done by the HR department, I came up with a simple GUI here. So this is all native PowerShell. And the person that we're going to decommission here is G. Paulson at jorenby.us. And this is going to be a decommission event. Now, you're probably going, wow, there's a lot going on here on the screen. Many times as an architect, when I work with customers, they may or may not have much experience with PowerShell. So over the years, I found that I really put a lot of verbose logging into my PowerShell script just so they can understand it, see the flow. And so that's why you're seeing, frankly, probably more information on the screen here than you might typically see. So we have the user. We have a decommission event. Now, they also had a solution or a need to transfer users between departments. We won't be, doing that today. We're just going to go decommission a user. So they also have a supervisor. So I'll just pick an account up in O365. Now, again, the goal here is to do some renaming on the on-premise user, ensure that the manager or supervisor has access to the SharePoint folder of that's going to contain the user's OneDrive content. So you're probably thinking, well, why not just give the manager access to the user's OneDrive? And that would certainly work. But in this case, because the user had departed the company, they wanted to release the license. Well, as we all well know, when you release the license, you lose the, let's call it, native features of accessing a OneDrive.
Sure.
Absolutely, you could certainly use eDiscovery to do that, but they wanted the managers to be accessing the OneDrive content in a file, in a OneDrive file folder type fashion and not have to go to eDiscovery. So we have our user. We're going to decommission this user, and we're going to click OK. Now, again, okay, so let's go ahead and see if this works here. Okay, good. All right, so now we're back on, the name will change, but maybe we can just work through that. Okay, so we're now in the decommissioning process. Now, the decommissioning process does a lot of end user things to the account. Sure. So, for example, we are going to rename or release the original SMTP address. We change the SAM account name. We change the display name. So this is all standard PowerShell commands that we're running against the on-premise remote mailbox. You can see here we are converting the remote mailbox into, we're converting the standard remote mailbox into a shared mailbox.
Got it.
We set the description. We were removing proxy addresses here because in their requirements, they were to release the original primary SMTP and then release any aliases or proxy addresses to that. We're changing the remote routing address. Again, very, very verbose as logging in here because, again, some customers are not, familiar or comfortable with PowerShell. So at this point, we've made changes to the on-premise user account. So we'll just, on the other side here, what I'm doing is a quick synchronization to get AAD sync.
Sure. And I did a very similar exercise when I worked for a managed services provider. So long before I even touched Azure or knew more about Azure outside of Azure Active Directory, I was an Exchange admin, and I don't think anybody wants me to touch their mailboxes anymore. I mean, I guess I could, but I mean, I was the on-prem Exchange admin. But anyway, so we had this whole workflow where we converted, because they were very heavy on email. They had not really done much with OneDrive. They actually just had a user share. So they would do this on premises. I think it was like a PowerShell, maybe it's even a Bash script. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that process, but I had to come up with a way to convert their mailbox into a shared mailbox and then give the manager access to that mailbox for a set period of time. But that's before all of these goodies really existed. So it was a lot more trial and error, I think. I know you had gone through some of that with this, but I feel like it was a lot worse a number of years back.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about the amount of changes that the customer is wanting, there's lots of opportunity to fat finger something,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, easily.
At least when you do it via script, if you broke it, you broke everyone exactly the same way. So then theoretically, you could
True.
break it.
Right. Exactly. True. Very much so.
So a little bit under the hood here, when we take a look, what actually happened and how are we letting the automation in the run book know what's going on here? So if we take a look at the user account, this is one of the users that I decommissioned earlier here. And what I'm doing is I'm actually storing information in extended attributes, which is very, very common done with Exchange admins. So extension attribute in the GUI, it's known as custom attribute, same thing.
Right.
We store the date that it's decommissioned. We then store the supervisor or the manager. This is the person that's going to get full mailbox access to the mailbox that's been converted to shared. And this is also the person that's going to be assigned to the access package. And then the state of which the decommissioning process is being done. So it's a decommission event. You'll remember in the script we had a user transfer, that would be UT, the service, which is in this case Exchange Online, and then the step that we are at during the process. Because when we rename a OneDrive account, it can take time for that UPN rename to be acknowledged. And we'll get into that when we do the run book. So there's been nothing done with Exchange on this user, and this particular user, May 5th, has completed the OneDrive decommissioning process. I know that because this is a 2. If we take a look at the user that we just did, it'll be very similar in nature, but you'll notice here that there's been no processing with Exchange, and there's been no processing with OneDrive. And this is the person that we're going to run through the process here. So at the end of the day, we are indicating the decommissioned state of the user based upon various attributes stored on the user object.